Nico and UCLA stock have dropped considerably since the spring transfer portal season.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. Welcome back, everydayers. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Once again, joined by Brian Smith of Locked On the Portal, Locked On Knowles, and we're going to go into it today. Nico's stock, the offense, how it's just dropped off from any high hopes we had before the season. Then we're going to dive into, can it really be salvageable? Was there hope enough in the second half against UNLV? And then 3, how much is the first 2 weeks of recruiting or first 2 weeks of the season killed recruiting? We've teased that weeks ago, and finally we have the return to Brian Smith. So Brian, dive into it. Give me the good, give me the bad. Nico, why is he getting picked off as a 6'6 QB, dropping the arm slot so low?
I think a lot of that is just laziness with not only Nico, but the coaching has to be better, and it also has to be more consistent with consequence. Sometimes when, think of like the best pitcher for the Dodgers over an era or whatever, when they go through streaks, if you really break down the film, it's the same thing. They're doing something stupid. When Nico is right with his technique, that arm is insane. He's not consistent with it. And it also hurt them early in the game. But not that he threw terrible all game, but just one play in a football game, as we saw at the end when he got picked, every little thing you do, every practice, every rep here, coaches talk about that. Nico hasn't been consistent with it. And it was part of his problem at Tennessee. But when he's right, he's right. It's why it's so frustrating to cover him in any way, shape, or form. And I've had the chance to meet him a few times. He's a good guy, but he has to be better with that. On that point, you still also need guys around you that go get it and make some special plays. UNLV's better than what I thought they would be. Let's give them some credit. They give out scholarships too. But UCLA, especially in the first quarter, which they were dreadful, 17 total plays on their first 3 drives, 66 yards. Like they would just get a little bit and then they would just shoot themselves in the foot with a bad run or a bad read by Nico, whatever it was. And UNLV capitalized. They were the clutch team. By the way, for the game, I still have a hard time understanding this when a team averages 5 yards a carry. UCLA was 3 of 13 on third down. And you can run the ball. But they didn't do it enough. Like there's just so many little things about why this game was goofy, and it was just UCLA's fault. They should have beat UNLV 2 touchdowns. Conservatively, but yet they were down 17-0. I remember. Yeah, I mean,
23-0, 23-3 at half.
Yeah,
and they're losing this game. So, and part of that reason, 13 penalties, 130 yards. That takes you probably out of those running situations. You accumulate all those yards, and then you hold, and the officials aren't going to throw the flag every time, but they threw it quite enough that you put yourself probably in those third and not manageable situations.
Yeah, 3rd and 5 and longer. As a rule, you're going to pass the football, and you got Nico. But look at it this way, if you're an NFL scout right now, which guys for UCLA would you say a wide receiver like, man, I want that dude? They get behind the sticks, just like most college teams, it's a problem. Ohio State, okay. Most people can figure it out. If they got a mediocre quarterback, they're going to be okay with that group. Like Brandon Ennis might be their number 3. He's going to play in the NFL. That's the only team really like that other than maybe Auburn or Alabama. UCLA ain't there. So you're right. 100 and some odd yards of penalties, ridiculous. But that brings up the big overall point for this pod, and I'm sure UCLA fans are aware of this, but it's time to be like, why are they not motivated at the beginning of the games to be focused? How is that possible? You're UCLA.
And after you got embarrassed by Utah, right, you would think you don't play worse, because they didn't play this sloppy and this bad on offense against Utah. They just couldn't block for Nico. And then week 2, it started similarly, and they couldn't pass protect for him. They were very complex in the schemes, it seemed like, a little early on. And just penalties. And it's just like, wow, this is bad and just absolutely dreadful. Like, I don't know how you go from The DeShaun Foster saying we're close. We're going to see a lot of improvement. And we didn't truly see that until you're down 20 points and trailing 17 points late in the fourth quarter to even have a chance to tie the game, where UCLA should have been completely ahead in this game. That's where it's embarrassing, Brian.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for just being more focused, because all the stuff we're talking about, penalties in particular, that's usually mental. Like my technique was sloppy. We talked about with Nico. Sometimes he throws from a goofy angle. All this stuff is mental. So I know this is early in the season. I'm going to say it. Like DeShaun Foster deserves a lot of this blame. He hired the coaches to coach these guys, and they're making the same errors across the board. Not just offense. Defense made some stupid things too, but they were put in some pretty awful situations, like zero momentum on offense. UNLV came out hot, give them credit. But, I mean, you're back on the field. It's like, dude, you want to help us out a little bit here? Like the coaching staff for UCLA deserves a lot of this blame too, because your team was predominantly flat. Come on. They acted like they were out on the strip the night before gambling at the craps tables. That's kind of energy UCLA showed. So I'm not surprised by this in a lot of ways. It just, from the first quarter on, they were a disaster in terms of that quarter. And it just, even though they played much better in the middle part of the game, it was just too much, man. 20 down 17, down 23, any of that should never happen at UCLA.
Not on the road to UNLV, to a team in UNLV that had given up yards and points to Idaho State and Sam Houston State. Like, it's not like, oh, they came out. Paul Gunther's defense looked light years better, apparently, against UCLA, and a hyped quarterback prospect than one of the worst FCS programs in the country, who is 0-3. Like, you could argue an 0-3 Idaho State team has played better games than UCLA has played against their two teams in competition. Like, even Idaho State had a lead on UNLV in the fourth quarter on the road, and UCLA never had that opportunity, just to tie. So the next question for you, Brian, is, are these still the same issues plaguing Nico? Does he look even worse at UCLA, or has he just not gotten better, or is it just no help?
I think there's a combination there. I mean, he's better in some ways. Like, I think his knowledge, just playing reps, when to take off is probably a little better. But I say this all the time, and it makes people mad. Like, guys like me that try to grade recruits, especially quarterbacks, the most valuable trait to grade a quarterback on, we don't have access to. We need to see what it's like for them to make post-snap reads against real defenses. Well, there aren't really real defenses in high school, because you show cover 3, you run cover 3. In college, you show cover 3, then they jump into match, they jump into cover 1 or whatever. We have no idea how they're going to do it. Nico has been very slow with his progression of post-snap reads, and most guys never get it. There's a lot of guys still in the NFL that are not very good at it. There's not many, period. But, like, if he could just figure it out a little bit, he'd have at least one wow throw every week that leads Sports Center, because his arm is as good as any I've ever scouted. Like, it's insane. I just don't think he's progressed enough there. And I don't think he necessarily trusts all these receivers and stuff. Yeah, you got to remember, he came in after spring, so that's very disadvantaged. So I think the combination there is a problem. But I'll ask again, who's their dude at receiver?
I would say it's Quasi Gilmer. Quasi Gilmer had a nice catch on the sideline, if you remember, leading them down the sideline. Yeah. But you have to be a factor in your first couple of first halves and just not be quiet. This also hurts because UCLA had Cade Robinson lined up to come play with Aguilar from App State, and I think he would have been that vertical threat, and he was ineligible. Then you have Rico Flores Jr., who came from Notre Dame, had a really good game week 1 of 2024, and has been hurt and unavailable to play all that season, and is not going to play maybe till October of this year. And that could be a top-tier guy. But I think Titus Mokia-Otamalala can do some things, and Mikey Matthews has some promise, but promise has to turn into plays on the field, and it's just not showcasing. UCLA, it doesn't seem like they're super featuring the tight ends all the time. It doesn't seem like they're hitting guys vertical down the field. And when they kind of are, or they have a guy wide open, Nico's missed him twice. Mikey Matthews in week 1, if you remember his first drive, overthrew the guy, would have been a clear touchdown, and then overthrew a guy for a touchdown in this game. I forget what, like the fourth quarter. He's had 2 touchdown overthrows, which is exactly what the Tennessee fans have been saying this whole time.
There it is. When you do get your opportunities, you got to seize them, especially if it's just blatant. So, like, you like Quasi a lot, and I think he's a good player, but is he a guy that's dominant? They still don't have that either, in my opinion. I mean, he may end up being, but part of that might be Nico. Maybe there isn't enough chemistry there. And I think that's maybe the biggest thing overall. Again, it goes back on Foster and everybody else. There's not enough chemistry on this team, especially offensively. They looked pretty atrocious early on, and you dig yourself in that much of a hole, and then you got to start throwing the ball, and Nico's not ready for that yet. I mean, it's just compounding nonstop. So hopefully Quasi gets some help. Hopefully Rico gets healthy. But I want to turn to one other thing real quick, at least when we come back from break. Like, they've got to run the ball come hell, come high water in their next game. First half, they've got Thomas, and they got multiple guys. Plus, Nico is a heck of an athlete. They need to do that to take some off Nico's plate and keep the defense on the sideline and not getting gassed. They don't have the kind of depth to play that many reps in the first half and then win against Big Ten opponent. That's not going to end well.
And we'll see, can UCLA actually beat those Big Ten opponents? Is this the worst UCLA team ever, or can they salvage it just like they did in 2024? Brian and I with more on that next on Locked On UCLA. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts of your doorstep tomorrow with over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from the punting projects. And also, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered, think about this. If you need parts fast for a project, Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a big-time game changer. Join the free Trademaster program today and score some serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, a dedicated phone line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use the promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel more like a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to you and me, the fans. It's the easiest way to score those last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. The app's super simple, and you can see the exact view from your seat. So maybe you're going on a big road trip to see an epic college football game, or maybe to a new baseball venue. And you're like, I don't want to get stuck behind a pole. I have a terrible seat. That's where Game Time shows you where those seats are. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, everybody. We're diving into a potential positive segment, or it could get really bad. I don't know, Ryan. It's, can the season be salvaged? Can Nico resurrect himself from the ashes that it looks like that UCLA's, fallen to as a program as a whole? Can this be salvaged? Or has Nico made what is one of the worst transfer decisions in college football history, and it's DeShaun Foster in over his head?
I think all those things are on the books. Let me start with this. Let's make it easier on Nico no matter what his decision was, good, bad, or indifferent. You got to run the ball in the first quarter. Give Anthony Woods the ball, give Thomas the ball. Let Nico run a little bit. Like, just as a reminder, he was like the number one volleyball recruit in the nation, a top 10 football recruit. Like, he's a freak athlete. But you need to rely on that because that defense doesn't have the depth, doesn't have the playmakers to go out there play after play and then watch your offense go 3 to 5 plays punt, 3 to 5 plays turnovers. It's just, if they don't run the ball better early in games more consistently without the penalties, let's make sure we get that in there. Over 10 penalties, that's horrific.
It's embarrassing.
It really is, because it just shows the lack of focus. Again, and I say this all the time, people get mad, but it's true. The reason coaches bitch and moan so much about doing it right every rep all the time in practice, because they know they need muscle memory, because kids look at the helmets in terms of how much effort they put into the opponent. It's unfortunate you can't do that, but that's what college kids do. They did not take UNLV seriously. There's no way in the world. You're down 23-0 UNLV. Come on, man. They did not take that game seriously. And that's why they do that. Well, obviously, if we would have had access, which they get none of, to you guys out there in LA, obviously, for practice, I have a feeling that we would have been very disappointed on Tuesday, Wednesday when they usually hit in practice, how lackluster tackling was, how lackluster blocking was, focus on all that stuff. All those things either get fixed in the next game to 2 games, or this season's going to end at like 3 or 4 wins. That's what's going to – it's one of the two. There's not going to be a happy medium 6-6 UCLA here, my guess, because this is the transfer portal era. And if they're like, let's say after 6 games, if they're 1-5, you're going to see the quit factor go near 100 million miles an hour. It's just true.
And last year they started 1-5, and the complete opposite happened. They went and they surged to the finish where we thought that momentum would swing forward in 2025. But the problem is the schedule is easier in 2025 in the first half. That's where you're supposed to bank your wins. I mean, I guess we could argue about Utah because Utah looked really, really good in that first game. But UNLV, that's supposed to be a win. New Mexico, that is clearly supposed to be a win. And that is no longer a bankable win. UCLA at home versus the Lobos, because the Lobos gave Michigan fits in week 1. A lot of stuff. And here's one more thing. Before Nico's even taken the field, he is trailing in both these games. Before he's touched the football, he is already losing. And in the UNLV game, 7 minutes went off the clock before he touched the ball, and UCLA is already trailing. Only by a field goal, but that's just got to be demoralizing that you're trying to bring in the offense, reignite everything, and you're trailing. That's just a dejected factor for the offense that's still trying to figure it out. And they're down in so far each of the first 2 games.
That's kind of where I'm at too. And again, the defense is not loaded with future 3rd and 2nd round picks, let alone 1st round picks. You got to take them off the field as much as possible. So they stunk early on, obviously, but then you contributed as well. 17 plays for 66 combined yards on your first 3 drives. No points. Penalties, shooting yourself in the foot was a part of it. Poor decisions, running backs not always hitting the right hole, like little things just compound. So I say again, and I know you guys don't have access. DeShaun's not very good with the media. But if they don't have a really good week, like if that New Mexico game or any game similar, like a lower Big Ten team, if any of those games go down to the 4th quarter, you should, your talent should still win out. At this point, I'm just going to call it out. Does UCLA have the culture when they're, you have to win your clunkers? You've heard that phrase. I don't think UCLA's got the ability to do that.
They're not good enough, and they're not together at the moment. Last year they were able to win 5 one-score games. This year they're 0-1.
That's exactly right. And those things, by the way, I'm sure you're familiar with Phil Steele. These things tend to swing hard. Turnovers and 1-score games from year to year, for whatever reason, they swing hard. So if UCLA was the beneficiary last year, chances are they're going to be the one getting dropped on this year. They're going to lose the 24-21 game, the 30-23 game. So they need to be more focused. Play 1 first quarter of each game moving forward to give themselves any chance, especially in the Big Ten.
Is the second half, would you say the second half production from UCLA, is that projectable moving forward? Because they did move the ball. They clearly outplayed UNLV in the second half, but the embarrassment and the lack of focus was still there from the first half, and the lack of execution with the discipline and the penalties still racked up. They looked better, but if you stop making penalties, stop missing on overthrows, then they still probably win that game miraculously, but they did not.
I think it's possible, but I mean, that's where the chemistry thing comes in. Culture, chemistry, that those really important C words, they usually don't happen in a half. 3rd, 4th quarter, UCLA played pretty well by their measure. They still didn't finalize. They only gave up 7 points in the second half. Defensively, obviously better. But UNLV didn't put their foot on the gas quite as much either. At least UNLV, if they held them under 10 in the second, like that's one way you could look at it. But you still didn't finish against a team that you shouldn't have ever been in a contest with. You should have beat them by 2 touchdowns to begin with. Should have been like 21-7 UCLA at half. So I don't know how I want to go with that. I need to see them play again. I need to see them go out and win it again, because to be really honest with you, I'm not sure all the players are bought in right now. And I already talked about the quit factor. I'm worried that the next, if they have another bad game, or if they lose for any, even if they play fairly well, they lose, this could really teeter-totter. Last year was year one for Foster. I think everybody was just, feeling it out.
A lot of returners.
Yep. If it's not working year two with the same coaches, quit factor it's the portal factor, really. Quit factor and portal factor are the same thing. There could be a lot of guys looking to leave Los Angeles. I know that's not what Bruin fans want to hear, but this is a college football problem, and I'll use the comparison. UCLA is a big deal, West Coast and all that. Like, I live in the South, and I've lived in Florida. Florida Gators football is a big deal. If you want to see a riot, just go hang out in Gainesville right now and just mention the Gators not firing Billy Napier. Somebody will punch you in the face. Like, their culture is garbage, and they got so much talent, it's insane. I mean, it's insane. And they just got beat by USF. Coach is terrible with timeouts. Coach is terrible with making sure his players are accountable. Special teams are bad. They didn't do the right things in terms of going for all those little things. It's just at UCLA, but with less talent. Like, Florida can halfway get away with it. You can't do that at UCLA. So I wonder if Foster is going to be fighting an uphill battle and like he's a walking dead duck next year after like a 4-8 season.
If he gets there.
That's what I mean. Like,
legitimate programs and well-run athletic departments would say this was maybe more of an interim. Let's kind of just bridge the gap for 2 years, and then we get rid of this guy. I think what could have been the best case scenario is UCLA maybe should have made DeShaun Foster interim head coach in 2024. And then that could have been, and then that he's like, you get a returner, you put an interim tag on, because you generally see coaches who are let go sometimes that late, or Chip Kelly as he left kind of late. If he was an interim, we think very differently about DeShaun Foster, right? It's like, okay, let's see, can he earn the job? He probably didn't, but he did arguably a fine job, depending on your version of fine. In 5 and 7, a lot of talent, like, hey, let's recruit, all these things. But then obviously you're not going to get any recruits to commit. So the hope was that something would happen. But do you think UCLA could get more than 30 wins, or this could be one of the worst UCLA teams you've ever seen?
I don't know if it'll be the worst team that I've seen or close to it, because they've got enough individual pieces. Like, got a couple good, like, the skill talent on offense is not bad. I'm more worried about depth in the trenches, especially, I mean, it's inevitable. Like, what happens when your right tackle has to miss a week because of a high ankle sprain? Mm-hmm. What happens when, Thomas is out and the other kid's really good, but he's got to play an extra 20 snaps? How good is he in the fourth? Like, their depth is just not where it needs to be. When you get to games 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like you play West Coast, they talked about this already, and I'm sure you've talked about this on Locked On UCLA. West Coast teams that go east for some of these ridiculous kickoff times, it's BS, by the way. That's a big pet peeve for me. Washington played 2 games last year, 12 o'clock Eastern time kickoffs. Come on. I'm sure UCLA is going to get screwed with that too, because they don't have a big media draw outside of the West Coast. How are they going to play in those kind of games? I could just see it going bad where they have a game against a mid-level Big Ten team.
Michigan State.
Arizona State playing very poorly at Mississippi State, at least beginning of the game. And then they got smoked on that last play. If anybody hasn't seen that, that's some of the worst coverage I've ever seen. But why they were in cover 1 that late in the game, I have no idea. That's another story. That's crazy. But at the same time, when you go play one of those games, if you lose 35-7 to somebody, it could be the crater. That's my concern. If that game transpires in the first 6, and you're telling me that the back half of the schedule is definitively harder, which it is, Zach, this 4-8, that might be generous.
It might be generous.
3 might be possible. Because I know this is I hate this, but it's the truth in all sports. The number one impact on every game is injuries. It's just the way it is. Who's actually on the field? They have any run of injuries on top of, they don't have much chemistry, this thing can go sideways. So the next 2 weeks, I say again, are pivotal. They got to run the ball. They got to rest their guys. You got to assume the worst, hope for the best. And they got to figure it out to take some off Nico's plate. The defense is more concerning because, like, Brian Kelly said this one time, and he's a goofball, but he was right. You can scheme offense, but defense is about recruiting. And recruiting's my business. And UCLA's defensive recruiting is not where it needs to be over the last 5 years. That roster is not where it needs to be. So unless the offense starts having more consuming drives, especially early in games, to keep that defense off the field, this team's going to get wore down. And in the back half, they're going to lose about every close game. And they might have a couple, I don't know which games they have going back east. Those could go very, very south. So
Ohio State mid-November.
that could be 56-7. Straight up. That could be 56-7 because they've got a chance to run the table and get the number one seed. They're going to bury teams that they can. Ryan
Especially
Day
that late in the season.
He does not care. He will drop the hammer. If it's snowing or raining or something, LA kids probably aren't going to do real well in Columbus either. So that place is very cold in November. I grew up 2.5 hours from there. It's not a friendly place in November.
Well, is UCLA going to be a friendly place for recruits? Are the recruits going to be friendly to UCLA? We've teased this before, Brian. Is the recruiting momentum UCLA had in the summer gone? The trendy pick in the fall, in the winter of the transfer portal, whenever it is that going to happen? Not likely, but let's debate it next on Locked On UCLA. Quick question for all you college football fans out there. If you could go back in time and sit at the front row of your school's biggest rivalry game, what hat would you be wearing? Yes, I said hat. For me, it would be the game. These aren't just hats. They're the same vintage styles you wore back in the 80s, the 90s. And guess what? They still go for the same price that they did back when they did then. So when you use the code Locked On, you can get your vintage hat for $16.99. Think about the awesome UCLA years. You can wear the cool swag, the cool gear, the cool hats from that age and have a great deal. $16.99. Head to thegamecaps.com. Grab your team's classic ball or retro circle design and use the code Locked On for an exclusive discount because legends wear the game. UCLA in their class of 2026 has what is close to a top 20 class. They had a lot of momentum. They pushed for a brief moment in the summer, a top 10 class, and then it teetered because a lot of commits went. But so far, that was a success for DeShaun Foster. And now UCLA sits there. How many of these recruits, from what you've seen in this disastrous start, Brian, are going to start thinking elsewhere? Or do kids just go for the biggest bag? Doesn't matter how a team does in their year before they go to college?
Oh, it matters because relationships are still number one above the money, but the money can get you over the top in a close race. So I think they did a pretty good job, to be honest. They were one of the surprising teams in recruiting. Yaya God. They got Xavier Warren. They got guys from all over the place, so like Tennessee, Texas. They got the Florida kids. They got 4 Florida
Massachusetts.
Recruiting. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good job of recruiting, to be really honest. The downside of that is historically, it doesn't have to be UCLA. You can use any program you want, but if it was University of Texas, obviously a blue blood, if you got like 5 or 6 kids from the Northeast in Florida or something that were key and you started off the season 3-3, those kids are less likely to stick with you than a kid that's from Dallas or Houston. UCLA's in that same boat here. Micah Smith, to me, is their best recruit, the kid from Vero Beach, Florida. He's got teams coming after him, right? Like his phone is blowing up. I guarantee it. I haven't contacted Micah. Guarantee it. Mario Cristobal and Florida State really needs offensive linemen in this class. Really does. I guarantee you, Herb Hand, the O-line coach at FSU, after the way they've played, they're coming after it. The Gators probably doesn't matter, but that's another story. You're going to have guys all over the country coming after these guys, and they got a couple of D-line recruits, too, that are really good. Carter Gooden. He's from Tabor Academy and just outside Boston. That's going to be a little rougher. David Schwartz from one of the famous programs up in the state of Washington, O'Day. It's O'Day Catholic, tradition-rich program. He could go to UW. He could probably call Michigan. He could probably call A&M. He could probably call all kinds of schools, get an OB. These are concerning situations because so much at the top of their class are out of state and you're losing. So I don't know what their NIL is for some of their top kids. But I would say right now I would be very concerned if I was DeShaun Foster and really anybody in the UCLA athletic administration, because if the recruiting class starts falling, that puts you in a more difficult situation with DeShaun. If they go, again, under 500, if they win 3, 4, 5 games, he's on the super hot seat and your recruiting class is bad. You've got a walking duck next year at head coach.
And the problem is these guys they've recruited are addressing the problems they currently have. It's not like DeShaun Foster is delirious. It's not like, he's going after what they are missing. And it's almost like, can he bridge the gap between 2 mediocre years to get to year 3 if he can keep all this potential talent offensively, keep his offensive coordinator, keep his defensive coordinator, just like to keep stability. They're going after the right guys and expanding their national footprint. But is it all for naught because they're not going to be able to keep these guys because they'll eventually flip? UCLA had what? One of the best defensive line recruits. And then he flips to Ohio State on the day of early signing day. And that was after a 2024 season that was okay after how it started, but they finished 5-7. And that could happen very well with a Carter Gooden, a Micah Champ-Smith, because we see Nico can't get any time to throw. He can't be protected. They're doing a lot better running the ball in the second half versus UNLV, but you want to do that from the jump. You don't want to be playing walk-ons all the time like they had in 2024, and you need some semblance of a D-line pressure, because remember, UCLA was not too bad defensively just 2 years ago, and all that NFL talent is gone.
Yeah, they did that D-line group was really impressive, but it's not the same now. So you're trying to restock. But if you're those kids, look, this is how it works. This is not my opinion. This is what I've been told. This is what I've learned over decades. When a coach is on the hot seat, and DeShaun now needs to be labeled on the hot seat because they're just not very good, other teams are going to call kids and say, he ain't going to be there. This is how it works. Fair or unfair, that's how it's going to be. And kids go to schools because of the coach, not because of the school. I know boosters don't want to hear that, but that's across the board, Georgia or anybody else. Once that starts permeating, it's going to be difficult. They have to win games, and not New Mexico. I'm talking about Big Ten games, road games. They need a victory against somebody that it's important. You know, at the end of the year, obviously, like USC and stuff like that, that's a whole nother level. But in the meantime, they need to win some games to get this off, because these kids are going to start taking visits. I guarantee it. And I don't blame them. They're 0-2, and they just lost to freaking UNLV. Would you blame them? Zach, I mean, I know you're a UCLA guy, but
no. I mean, at this point, like, it looks just like, who am I going to play for? It seemed like even in previous decades, some kids would keep their pledges and be like, all right, I'm going to go there. I'm going to stay local. But now with the NIL, the money you can make, the opportunity elsewhere, I mean, you're probably playing for more kids at your high school football games in SoCal than you are at the Rose Bowl at this point. That's unfortunate to say, but that's kind of the truth. It's embarrassing. It's just absolutely embarrassing at the moment. And here's the thing. The transfer portal, it's going to open at some point, whether it's the singular transfer portal in January or we still get the two at some point. Is there any way UCLA can become a trendy option? Because it seemed like they had a lot of momentum in the spring. They had a little bit of momentum at the end of winter transfer portaling. Can that happen when you're a team that's not that good? Or is it only the new momentum of a new coach that's not heading into year 3 and on the hot seat that can do something like that?
I don't know, man. Like, I'm a little leery to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'll leave it at that. Can they get hot this year enough to get into the December signing period, keep their guys? And then this is the part you're going to have to answer for me. In the portal, they obviously need more linemen too. Let's say they keep all their linemen and they're all their recruits. Highly unlikely. Everybody loses somebody, but let's just say for the point of emphasis, they do. Do they have the money and the willingness to go get some high-end guys in the portal?
I mean, it's tough because then you think, because you also have to get a quarterback, because Madden is the supposed heir apparent. You have Pierce Clarkson behind Nico, but then the big question hovering over the offseason is Nico gone. You could probably lean, yes, whether it's the portal, whether it's the NFL draft, whether you probably lean that. But if he returns, because I don't know if I wouldn't mind him. I wouldn't mind Nico returning. I think that'd be just fine if he comes back for year 2 at UCLA, but you need to protect him. But then you also got to think, if Nico returns, he probably wants more money, right? If you think about it, he was making more at Tennessee. The only reason why he's getting what was reported, $1.2 million from Pete Nakos on 3 is because he was so late. UCLA couldn't allocate as many funds probably to figure out. They've already filled out the roster with the money. They were trying to pay top dollar, or I don't know what top dollar is, but decent amount for a top receiver. He couldn't get eligible in Caden Robinson. Like, is Nico going to ask for a raise if he returns? Is he gone? Do they have to spend that money for a quarterback? Because I don't think Madden stays if Nico leaves, if he goes and transfers. Or if you go cheap on the quarterback, then maybe. But the situation is so dire that people might be like, I'm not going to take that money. That just might be a false promise.
That's where I'm at. Like, they've got a lot of questions. I'm not sure they can even completely trust what's going on behind the scenes. Nico's situation is fluid every day. That's how I would view it. I'm sure UCLA probably does. So they can't allocate all the funds they need to for linemen. They need O and D linemen, 100%. They need better defensive depth. And they also need to just at least consider the option. If Nico, hopefully for them, Nico gets hot and he's good at returns pro, because somebody would draft him because he's 6'6" and a freak with cannon for an arm. But if he's gone next year, now you got to spend some money on quarterback unless you think Clarkson is the guy, and he'd still probably want some money to stay. That's the other unfortunate part of this. So the portal for UCLA, they're going to be one of my 5 portal teams. So like, just see what happens. This could be the most chaotic. UCLA right now would be one of my 5 most chaotic portal teams for the offseason projected. They are in complete flux. We don't know which coaches are still going to be back. Is DeShaun going to be back? Is he going to get rid of coordinators? A million questions. They are the most difficult team, maybe west of the Mississippi, to predict what's going to happen in the offseason.
And I guess there's no better way to end it than that. That is just as perfectly put as this whole situation is. Messy, disastrous, terrible, disappointing, embarrassment, and the unknown is going to just build and build until they make a big splash in the victory department, or if the athletic department makes a big splash and cuts bait with the coach, the staff, the athletic director, any of these things to move forward. And until that happens, it's only up to UCLA to win games on the field to change perspective, and that doesn't look like that's going to happen at the moment. No.
I don't see it.
It's brutal. This was the stretch to win games, and we're a little sour, but that's why it's fun, and it's great to have Brian Smith locked on the portal. He knows what he's talking about, and locked on Knowles. So he's known what it takes to see a team go from a good record to terrible and flip it. I don't know that's what we're seeing with UCLA. That's not what this is projecting. They didn't have a 13-0 season to just turn around and build into something. Like, that's not what DeShaun Foster's not Mike Norvell. They're not going to come out and beat Alabama. It hasn't happened since 01 when DeShaun Foster was the running back. So Brian, thank you for your time. We'll have to have you on. We'll have to have like a mid-season update after they have some winnable games, but I appreciate you coming on. Thanks, Brian.
Appreciate it.
All right. Check out Brian Smith. He is locked on the portal, locked on Seminoles, and has great knowledge talking about everything college football. So for Locked On UCLA, I'm Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer signing off. Go Bruins.